Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. Shruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. We are continuing this discussion on the most well-known philosophical system of India, that is Advaita. And as we discussed earlier, different traditions of the canonical literature of Indian philosophy, also with special difference to Advaita Vedanta. Before we take up some important topic on Advaita philosophy, I shall conclude a few more remarks on the interpretative literature, their nature, and how great thinkers and writers, dialecticians, and other commentators, they discussed, they established, refuted, and defended different philosophical views. So we are now going to discuss some of the typical interpretative literary traditions. One tradition is called vritti. Now, vritti is a brief explanation of an original work. An original work may need some explanation. Some words may have different meanings, and because of the nature of Sanskrit grammar, words can be interpreted differently, and also according to the philosophical point of view of different systems of philosophy. So frequently a work may need some explanation. So it's a very brief, informal piece of interpretative work. It is called vritti, which is nothing but a brief explanation. So there are a number of vrittis on Brahma Sutras. For example, one well-known vritti is called, Sadasiva Brahmendra's vritti. So Prakashiga it is called. Just one example. Another kind of interpretative work, which is larger in scope, is called Vartikam. So Vartika is an elaborate critique written on an original work. For example, a work may be explained, interpreted by a great philosopher, expounding his philosophy. And that kind of work in which he establishes a system of philosophy by writing a commentary on the work is called the Bhashyam. So Bhashya has got certain unique features. A Bhashya contains a word-to-word explanation, interpretation, and also on the basis of that interpretation, the Bhashyakara, the commentator, in English commentator, he establishes a system of philosophy. For example, Shankaracharya established Advaita, non-dualistic system of philosophy by writing commentaries on 10 Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, he wrote many other books, including short introductory works and also a number of devotional poetry. But the most important work that Shankaracharya wrote was this commentaries on the 10 Upanishads, Shruti Prasthana and Brahma Sutras called Nyaya Prasthana, and his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita is called Smriti Prasthana. Now, on these bhashyas, for example, Sureshwaracharya, who was a disciple of Shankaracharya, is a great monk himself, was a disciple of Shankaracharya, who wrote a Vartika. Mostly it will be in verse. He wrote a Vartigam on Shankaracharya's commentary on Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It's called Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashya Vartigam. So it's a super commentary, a commentary on another commentary. Now remember, in some literary tradition, there will be commentaries upon commentaries upon commentaries. I remember, you should always remember, we are now entering a realm of intellectual exercise, which may not be very entertaining, but as I mentioned on many occasions earlier, this age needs a discussion on the grand philosophical heritage of humanity. If at any point of human history, any phase in human history ever needed and badly needed a real serious interest among academics on the philosophical and the spiritual heritage of human race, this is that age, the age of innovation, the age of superficiality, and the age of sacrificing meaning just for the sake of simplicity or under pretense of simplicity. So again, so Vartikam is a very, very important piece of super commentary. Sureshwaracharya's Brihadaranya Upanishad Bhashya Vartikam is a very elaborate work. To give an example, how important it is, we come to know of many schools of philosophy that existed during the, let's say, during the phase of Indian history from, let us say, from around 2000 BC up to around 600 AD. We come to know of many of these schools of philosophy which dominated India's intellectual landscape only from Sureshwaracharya's Vartikam, because the scope is so large, the work is so extensive. So you find so many schools of philosophy are referred to Bhartu Prapancha's, Jnana Karma Samuchaya, just give an example. And many other schools of thought that existed in ancient India are referred to, explained, and expounded, and sometimes criticized, because many of them were animistic, many of them were highly ritualistic, and many of them were very dualistic in nature. So this is an example. It's called Vartikam. So Sureshwara's Bhashya Vartikam is the most well-known and certainly the most profound and the most extensive among this group of interpreted literature called Vartikam. Another one is, there is a Vartika known as Manasollasa, which is actually a commentary on the Dakshinamurti Stotram of Adi Shankaracharya. This is just one example. Now, of course, there are other small works belong to different categories. Now, I shall give some definitions of some of these interpretative works. This is very, very important, because we have to connect what we are talking to the ancient heritage, and for that we need to pay tributes to these great sages by referring to their definitions. For example, what is Vartikam? Vartikam is just a critique, as I mentioned. And what is Tika? What is Bhashya? To begin with, I shall begin with the definition on Bhashyam, because Bhashyam is the most crucial most important type of commentary. Because Ramanujacharya, the great Vaishnava philosopher, he established his Visishtadvaita philosophy called qualified non-dualism. Or Madhvacharya, his Dvaita philosophy, it's called, it's called dualism. They all established their system of philosophy by writing a bhashyam. So bhashyam, you can say commentary. Let's say it's a capital letter C, commentary. So what is bhashyam? Bhashyam is very simple. It follows every word that is mentioned in a book, and then it establishes a philosophy. It also adds certain ideas. It is called, sutrartho varnide yatra vakyam sutranusaribhihi so padanija varninde bhashyam bhashyavido vidhu. So bhashyavidaha vidhu, those who know what a bhashyam, what a commentary is, they say sutrartho varnide yatra. In a commentary in which a sutra is clearly explained. What is sutra? A sutra is nothing but this alpaksharam sandigdham saravat vishwato mukam astobham anavadyam cha sutram sutra vido viduhu. A single statement, maybe 2-3 lectures in Panini's sutra coming to the end of the Ashtadhyayi, pithy statement, it's called sutra. Sutram also can mean a thread, a garland. So sutram here means a pithy statement, a very brief statement. It need not be even in one sentence. It can be just one word. It can be just a few letters. So this sutram, it doesn't communicate with you unless a great teacher explains what the sutram contains. Most of India's philosophical systems, especially Astika Darshanas, like, Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, or Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, all these systems of Indian philosophy had sutra literature. The foundation is sutra. So Nyaya Sutrani, Gautama's Nyaya Sutrani, Kanada Vaisheshika Sutra, Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa Sutras, Badarayana's Brahma Sutras, of course, and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which we discussed for many years in this platform, which is available on the YouTube, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and also Sankhya Sutras, which are not fully available, but Ishvara Krishna written a book later called Sankhya Kariga. The Sankhya Sutras of Kapila are perhaps not available today. So all these systems of Indian philosophy had this foundational work called sutra literature, pithy statements. And then great philosophers wrote commentaries on these sutras. And other great philosophers who come in the lineage, they wrote super commentaries on the sutras. It went on like that. Another, what is sutra? It should be small statement. It should be self-contained. Once it is explained, it is self-complete. It won't leave any doubt. It can contain a lot of meaning and implications. Or samkshiptasya apyato aseva vakyasya arthagiriyasaham suvistradara vachyo bhashibhuda bhavanti. So a bhashyam is nothing but a great commentary written on these sutras. So we have already covered bhashyam, sutram, vritti, and vartika. Then there is another kind of small little work, like a gloss. It's called tippani. Sometimes you find in well-known, for example, Plato's Republic. There will be in the standard editions, there will be extensive notes, frequently referring to Neoplatonist philosophers and frequently referring to Augustine, how he was influenced by Platonian and Neoplatonism, and of course, then the Greek thought. So you can find a lot of interconnections. For that, it may require a gloss. It's called a tippani. So these are different types of interpretative works on different schools of philosophy. Then, of course, there are other books called Prakriya Granthas, with actually they deal with the methodology of involved in these books. Then there's another group of books called Siddhi Granthas, means those books are called Siddhis. For example, the most profound work in the Siddhi categories Advaita Siddhi, which we are actually going to discuss today when we discuss today's important topic, which is an important topic in Vedanta called Mithyatva, mean definitions of Mithyatva. Advaita Siddhi, Naishkarma Siddhi, all these are different examples of Swarajya Siddhi, Gangadharendra, these are some of the books which belong to the interpretative literature. Now, what did Indian philosophers do with the help of all these books? They dealt with different views of different schools of philosophy. For example, Sankhyas, they believed in Parinamavada, which means a kind of evolution here. They believed that there are two fundamental categories. One is Purusha, the other is Prakriti. Purusha is self-effulgent, but not involved in the evolution. Prakriti is not self-effulgent. It is not effulgent, but the entire creation, phenomenal world, also our mind, our intellect, our senses, these are all different evolutes of this Prakriti or Pradhana. This is a kind of evolutionism in Indian thought system. Now, this is one view. Now, Shankaracharya in his books, he refutes these views. Don't ever imagine that they were fighting and quarreling. That is an important thing. All of them were enlightened sages. It's an important thing. Sometimes people ask this question, if Advaita is true, then why should Shankaracharya say other things are wrong? He's not saying that. What he says is, in our spiritual evolution, at some point, we have a natural evolution from many to one, from without to within, from gross to subtle. Like that, as we evolve in our spiritual life, in our contemplative activities, we come to a higher and higher conclusion as to what is the nature of reality. It is a, so one should not ever imagine it was some kind of a quarrel. I gave this example in my last session. The most classical example can be found, any of you can go to Brihadaranyaka. There you find a strong, powerful lady, one of the greatest philosophers of her day. She just comes straight to the great assembly of great pandits and scholars and emperors and kings, Janaga's court. And Janaga is a typical philosopher king of those days. And she confronts, she challenges, who is the greatest philosopher here? I'm ready, I want to argue with them. No, don't you see a beauty, a charm, a sophistication, a refinement that is so admirable in ancient world, where they were not fighting with arms, they were not trying to convert people into their system of philosophy or some of the system of philosophy. Let us have a discussion on these fundamental questions of what is the nature of reality, what are the fundamental issues in human life. These ontological, metaphysical questions are discussed in great detail. So that is the age into which I want to lead you, at least intellectually. So otherwise, this discussion will be quite boring. One should be able to appreciate the profound refinement of those times. So Sankhyas believed, it's called Parinamavada, the doctrine of evolution, because they believe Prakriti is the source of the evolution of the entire creation and universe. And the Vaisheshikas, they believed in Arambhavada, and it's called Paramanu Karanavada or Padarthavada. They believed, it's called Indian atomism. They believed everything comes from Paramanu, a kind of atomic entity. We will discuss this in detail when we deal with the Vaisheshika philosophy. Then Buddhas, the Buddha means different schools of Buddhism, Sautrantikas, Vaibhashikas, Vijnanavadins, Shunyavadins, and also the early Buddhists, long before the beginning of the Shunyavada, Vijnanavada, Sautrantikas, and Vaibhashikas. From Buddha's time up to around the end of the, let's say, 3rd century BC, Most of the teachings were based on Pali canonical literature. So those views are discussed in these great philosophical works. Then Jainas believe in called Syadvada. I mean, a kind of option. It could be so, it could be otherwise. Syad mean it may be so. That's the meaning of Syad. It could be so. So they were not very decisive in their conclusions. So actually, the Jaina philosophy more or less got merged with different schools of Indian devotional systems and Indian ritualistic system in course of time. Then, of course, there was this school of different schools of Shaivism. It's called Pashupadamada, and Pashupadama in the school of Pashupati, Lord Shiva. They believed that Ishvara, God, is the ultimate cause of everything. More or less, the popular views of Abrahamic traditions. But Advaitins believed in what they called Brahma Nimitta Ubadana Karana, means Nimitta Karana. Nimitta Karana in modern, you can say, efficient cause. Upadana Karana means material cause. For example, if you're talking about a pot, the clay or the mud is the material cause, after which the pot maker with the efficient cause is made. And there are many auxiliary causes. A pot maker may use carriages, horse carriages to bring clay from a place to his place, and then he may need other auxiliary factors. So these are secondary. So the efficient cause and material cause of the whole existence is Brahman. This is the view of Shankaracharya. So, of course, then there are, of course, I already mentioned, there were the Indian materialists, Charvakas. They believed in Sankhadavada. Everything is a complex mechanism. And of course, there were different views with regard to Mimamsakas, ritualists. There were two schools of Mimamsaka, Prabhagara and Bhatta, Kumarila Bhatta, and the junior contemporary Prabhagara. So all these we will discuss in course of time. Now we are coming to the topic today. Now, to give an example, how a great Advaitin doctrine is expounded, defended, refuted, and again defended, and this chain of this chain of intellectual warfare extends over several centuries. This is an interesting scene. Now we are going to discuss just one important book, and apparently it is the most important dialectical work written during post-Shankarite period. So I shall give an example. Shankaracharya lived from 778 to 810 or 788 to 820, 32 years. After he passed away, a number of great philosophers emerged and wrote books expounding his views. What is nature of Brahman? What is Mithya? Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. This is the Sanskrit statement, like a slogan in Advaita. What it means? There is only one absolute reality, unchanging, absolute reality that never changes, that remains the same, that is comprehended and recognized and as unchanging during the three states of awareness, during waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. That is Brahman. And that is the efficient cause of this world. That is also the material cause of this world. Because the world is nothing but Brahman. But not as world. When you look at this world without using these glasses, the prism of name and form, then it is the same as Brahman. On the other hand, when we look at this world as a phenomenal entity, which is manifold, which is a composition of name and form, then it is this world. Now, the point is, we look at this world and think it is real because we don't understand that it is mithya. So what is mithya? Mithya is something that we consider to be real till we get spiritual enlightenment. An example can be given. A piece of rope lying in a room which is not well lighted. That piece of rope can be mistaken in 4 different ways according to Vedantic scholars. A piece of rope may be somewhat dark in color. It may be somewhat curved. It may, and a person who has seen a snake the previous day or sometime earlier in a forest or zoo may superimpose the shape and color of a snake on that rope because the rope looks like the snake that he has seen in the zoo or in the forest the previous day. So this is called adhyasa, superimposition. Now, when we bring light, the snake idea disappears and we find it is the same entity, but now it is recognized to be a piece of rope. Now, we can say this world is like that. This world is not in reality different from Brahman, but it appears to be different from Brahman. It appears to be real because we look upon it and we interpret it in terms of names and forms. And the moment you become a Jivan Mukta, a liberated soul, this wrong idea that this world is real goes away. But the world is there in front of you. You live in the same world, but you are fully aware of the fact that it is actually not real. Another thing is, Mithyatvam concept is not a philosophical construct, idea. It is something that we can all relate in our own life. We all know that everything in this world changes. Everything. Our body changes. The stock markets fluctuate. Bank balance goes down, goes up. Our health also changes. Body comes, grows, evolves, decays and dies out. We know that these things are not actually real in the absolute sense, because to be real, it should remain the same without any change. There is nothing in this world that remains unchanged. So it is simple common sense. It has got another ethical dimension. If we can really keep in our mind that this world is mithya, a lot of problems will be solved. Even human relations can improve. Hatred, jealousy, problems, quarrels, greed, all these things can be reduced if we keep in mind that this world, as we find, is not a big deal. It's not the only reality in this world. It is something changing that comes and goes. Because behind every feeling of greed, there is the wrong notion that money can give us everything. Money is everything. And money is eternal. Or the joy that money can bring is eternal. That is the psychological explanation for greed, violence, our tendency to dominate others. Power is everything. Power is eternal. The joy that power gives is eternal. So we are actually superimposing permanence on something which is obviously impermanent. We may know intellectually it is impermanent. Everyone knows. But that intellectual awareness doesn't help us. And Vedanta, or the doctrine of Mithyata, only tells you, gives a philosophical and spiritual superstructure to something that we all know, we all ought to know, but we frequently forgets, and as a result we suffer. That is the importance of the concept of Mithyatvam. Now, remember, during this period of post-Shankarite period, I mean, let's say from 8th century, late 8th century, let's say 9th century up to around 17th century, a number of philosophers emerged in India on different, on different sides, taking different philosophical views. After Shankaracharya came, Padmapadacharya wrote a commentary on the Brahma Sutra. It is called Panchapatika. And another saint, they were all monks and they were also saints. In fact, it's interesting. A good number of these scholars were monks, and some of them, of course, were not. So Padmapadacharya wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutra, Shankaracharya's bhasha called Panchapatika. And another philosopher belonging to the same lineage wrote a commentary on Panchapatika. It's called Panchapatika Vivarana. Vivarana means explanation, expansion. Another philosopher came and wrote Panchapatika Vivarana Prameya Sangraha. The one who wrote Vivarana is called Prakashatmayati. And another scholar came, he wrote Vivarana Prameya Sangraha. Like that, interpretative literature went on like this. Another philosopher of Shankaracharya's times, Vajaspati, he was one of the earliest writers along with Padmapada. Padmapada is a direct disciple of Shankaracharya. Vajaspati was, according to one school, Vajaspati became a disciple. But anyway, Vajaspati wrote a commentary from a different angle on the Brahma Sutra. It's called Bhamati. And then another philosopher on the same lineage wrote Kalpataru, then Kalpa Parimala, and so on. This went on. This is in Advaita tradition. Now, in dualistic tradition, Dvaita tradition, a number of philosophers emerged from, let us say, 13th century up to around the end of 16th century. They also wrote commentaries. The most interesting intellectual warfare, confrontation took place between Advaitins and Dvaitins. Madhvacharya wrote books, Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Tarkatandava, and so on, criticizing Advaitins. Then in Madhvacharya's tradition, Jayatirtha, Vadatirtha, and Vyasatirtha, they all came and wrote. In this confrontation, they discussed many subjects of Advaita philosophy. One subject we are going to take up, how they were dealing with these interesting subjects. I know it is very interesting. It's a profound subject. Okay, now Padmapadacharya, let us take him. Padmapada is the most respectable name after Shankaracharya's times. Padmapada and Sureshwara also, they both the disciples of Shankaracharya. So Padmapada wrote, as I mentioned earlier, Panchapatika. Now he gave an interesting definition to Mithyatvam. What is Mithyatvam? Sadasatta Anadhikaranatrupam Mithyatvam. Simple statement. Just imagine, just a definition causes so much of havoc. Sadasatta Anadhikaranatrupam Mithyatvam. This is the definition. What it means. What is Mithyatvam? What is the doctrine of, let us say, in English you may call illusion or delusion, because English translations are frequently is the case in philosophical literature. Any translation can only be an approximation, not an exact equivalent to the original state. This is very important. I mentioned this earlier in my talks. In India, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, at least some parts of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason were translated into Indian vernacular. Now, if you read in Indian vernacular, a translation of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, you will go totally crazy. Because the Indian vernacular cannot really reproduce or translate what can really meant. I don't say that because I have only access to English language. I don't say that English can do that, but English comes very close to German. So English can do much more justice than any Indian vernacular in translating, in reproducing Kant's ideas without going wild. Like that, when you reproduce some statements from highly profound dialectical works in Sanskrit and translate it in English, we should always remember it can only be an approximation. It can never do full justice. It's not because of the problem of language, because one philosophical idea, when it travels to another cultural, linguistic, social background, you need to explain a lot to drive home the idea. So the English equivalent of this, sadasatta anadhikarnattu mithyatvam, it will be something like this, it is not the locus of either reality or unreality. Sadasatta anadhikarnattu. Anadhikarnattu means, adhikarna means locus. Anadhikarnattu means not being the locus. It is not the locus of either reality or unreality. How can it be? For example, let's say you're watching this piece of rope. It is the rope that actually created the illusion that there is a snake. But really, snake is not there. But actually, can you say that rope is really the cause of the snake idea? Actually, the cause of the snake idea is your own mind, your memory. It is your memory that actually superimposed the snake idea on the piece of rope, because the piece of rope resembled the snake. So the locus of the unreal, which is snake idea, is unreal. It is not a snake, it's only a rope. It is not, this is not the locus of the real. On the other hand, you cannot say that it is something, it is the foundation of the rope, because it is the real rope. How can rope the foundation of ropeness? It is itself. You cannot say this table is the foundation of the table. We cannot say. So it is not the locus of either reality or unreality. Well, you can say it is indescribable. Something which cannot be called real, because if it is real, it will not change. But it is not unreal in the absolute sense, because if it is unreal, it will never even appear there. So this world is mithya, because the world is not real. The world is the locus. The world is not real. Why? If you're real, the world should always remain the same. If the world is unreal in the absolute sense, then we won't be living in this world. We won't be interacting with this world. We interact with the mountains, rivers, valleys, which constitute the world. So we cannot say it is totally unreal. But it cannot be real in the absolute sense, because what is real should remain the same without any change. You cannot say the world remains unchanged. At the same time, you cannot say the world is totally unreal. So it is neither real in the absolute sense. It is neither unreal in the absolute sense. It is indescribable. So the meaning of this definition is, this world is mithya. Mithyatvam is non-definability or indescribability. Now remember, I think I shall finish quickly today because this is a bit intricate argument. But I shall try to explain this during interaction if you have got any doubt. Shankaracharya himself defines Maya in identical terms in Vivekachudamani. Sangha pasangha vivyatmigano, bhinna abhinna vivyatmigano, sangha pasangha vivyatmigano, mahadbhuda anivachani rupa. So sanna pyasanna vivyatmi, sat na asat na api ubhyatmiga. It is not sat, sanna pi asanna pi ubhyatmiga. Sat na api, asat na api, ubhyatmiga. Na means it is neither real nor unreal, nor a combination of both. The combination of both is also indescribable. Again, it is neither without parts or with parts or a combination of both. It is neither different nor non-different or a combination of both. In the Vivekachudamani, the last pada of this verse, sannapya asannapya vyatmigano, etc. So, sangapya asangapya vyatmigano, bhinnapya abhinnapya vyatmigano, mahadbhudani vachaniyo. It is a great wonder. It is a great indescribability. So neither real nor unreal, neither with parts nor without parts, or the combination of both. Neither different nor non-different, or the combination of both. So it's a great wonder. It is something indescribable. So the world is indescribable. This is one definition of Mithyatvam, according to one philosopher. So that is Sadasatta Anadhikaranatirubam Mithyatvam. For your information, in India, in scholarly circles, at least there is still going on. They go on arguing for days on this subject. It's called Vakyartha Sadas. Vakya means a statement. Artha means meaning. And go on fight. But remember, very polite statement. Of course, it will be mostly in Sanskrit. So, well, you had to go to, let's say, 3rd century, 4th century BC Greece to get a picture of this. You know, you saw a man like Socrates, Plato, and others sitting and discussing these subjects. So that gives a lift to human civilization, human refinement. Not always wondering about how we can make a few more extra dollars. Instead of that, let us discuss the nature of the world, nature of reality. That gives a sophistication, refinement, and elevation to human culture and civilization. So it means the world is indescribable, because Sattva means Paramartha Vastu, remaining the same, Abhaditatvam, not ever getting modified, unchanging. Asattva means the character of getting cancelled, character of getting modified, changing. So this world is neither absolutely real, because if it is absolutely real, it will be unchanging, and the world is not unchanging. And if you're absolutely unreal, then we will never talk about it. Do you know, we will never talk about anything that is absolutely unreal unless you want to be certified by psychiatrists. We can never really discuss or conceive or imagine or anything that is totally unreal. Interesting. Shankaracharya makes a statement. Prasaktasya ko nisheda prasaktasya ka prastavaha. Aprasaktasya ko nisheda aprasaktasya ko prastavaha. You know, what is obvious, we don't make a statement. And we cannot deny it. No one can make a statement, this is San Francisco. It is obvious. And no one can deny the fact this is San Francisco. It's a prasakta means what is obvious. Well known to everyone. You don't make a statement. You don't go about telling your name is, don't say that. Or you don't make a statement, I have got 2 hands. Obvious. You don't make a statement, and you cannot deny it also. You don't say, I don't have two hands, you don't say. So what is obvious and what is totally inconceivable, we don't make a statement. That is important. So then we make a statement, this world is mithya. Why? Because there is a possibility that we may mistake this world to be real. But everyone, most of the people who are not enlightened spiritually, may know intellectually this world is, and this world is not real in the absolute sense. But there is every chance that in our emotional life, we behave as if this world is real. People collapse, they lose sleep when the stock markets collapse because they believe stock markets should remain the same all their life. Business fails because they believe business should succeed all the time. People will be terribly shocked when they are told by the doctors they have some illness, because they know, everyone knows intellectually, the body can never remain healthy all our life. One day it has to go away. At least when you're 100 years old, there will be some minor problems. But still, when we get that information that we have body some illness, we get the feeling. That's because unconsciously, without our being aware of it, we superimpose permanence on what is obviously impermanent. Therefore, Vedanta has to tell you, look here, this world is only relative, it is not real. That's why Shankaracharya shouted, Jagat Mithya. It is not that we are intellectually informed. We are taught, we are informed because we should translate this into our emotional life. And for that, this doctrine is of great relevance and importance. This is one definition. The second definition comes from a scholar, a saint, who wrote a commentary on Padmapada's Panchapadika. The book is called Panchapadika Vivarana. And the great scholar who wrote it was Prakashatmayati or Prakashatman. There is another scholar who lived in the 18th century, Prakashat. His name is Prakashananda, who is not such a prominent figure. Prakashatmayati is a very important name in one of the schools called Vivarana Prasthana Vedanta. He coming under the tradition of lineage of Padmapada. He wrote another book. It's called Panchapadika Vivarana. Vivarana means expansion, explanation. And he says, Pratipanno Badho Traikandika Nisheda Prayogitvam Mithyatvam. I mean, the world of multiplicity is for all times eternally negated in Brahman. So the point is, there cannot be multiplicity in Brahman. In Brahman, in the absolute reality. He cannot say that there was multiplicity at one point of time and later went away. Now we can relate this into our familiar example before I conclude today. We'll continue this again. I mentioned to you, this example of rope and snake, the Jusapa Bhranti. Again, think of the example, a semi-dark room, a rope lying on the floor, dark in color, somewhat curved. So you've seen a snake the previous day in a zoo, or maybe in the forest, and you relate the shape and size, the color of the rope to the snake that you're seeing. So you see the one side of the snake, one side of the rope resembles the head of the snake you are seeing in the forest yesterday. The other end of the rope resembles the tail of the snake that you saw in the forest yesterday. So the memory, the Smriti Rupa, it's called Adhyasa, means superimposition. Smriti Rupa means it functions as a memory. Unless if you have forgotten all about seeing the snake the previous day, then you won't superimpose snake on the rope. Of course, there are other options given in Vedanta literature. Danda, Bhuchidra, and Jaladhara. 3 other examples are given. The piece of rope can be mistaken to be a thin stream of water, a piece of stick, piece of wood, thin, or maybe a crack on the floor, Bhuchitra. These are 3 other options, whatever may be. Because you're seeing a crack on the floor on some occasions, you're seeing a thin stream of water, which also resembles, which is similar to the shape of the piece of rope lying in front of you, or maybe a piece of stick or something. So the point is, when you bring light, all these wrong notions disappear. So what happens? You understand it is a piece of rope. But the snake did not exist in the rope before you saw it. Of course, obviously, the snake idea will go away as soon as you bring light. So it will not exist after bringing the light. But even when you mistook that rope to be a snake, then also the snake did not exist on the rope. Traikalika Nisheda Prayogita, past, present, and future. So the snake is totally, completely, eternally in the past, present, and future negated in that rope. Similarly, this world constituting name and form, nama, rupa, etc., and causation. It was never there in Brahman because of our ignorance or avidya. We interpret, we see Brahman in association with names and forms, which are only coming and going, which are only non-eternal, which come and go. So once we get out of this ignorance, when we bring light, when we become Jivan Mukta after long spiritual practices, when we realize, when we get Brahma Jnanam, the knowledge of Brahman, then you'll be living this world. You will know this world is all the time, it was like this. It is a changing phenomenon. It never remains the same. So you won't be shocked if the world or anything in this world changes. This is the implication of this statement. So this definition is very well known. It's very famous. Pradipanno Vadho Traikaliga Nishedha Pradiyogittum Vithyatvam. That is this. The multiplicity is for all time, the past and the present and future, eternally negated in Brahman. This is that. Anyway, we'll continue this, and you can have a close interaction for at least for some minutes. You can go back to the age of the great exchange of ideas. Okay. Thank you. Namaskar. Now we can have interaction. Most welcome. Yeah.
David, why don't you go ahead?
Swami, I have a question about that may not be relevant, but it seems to me that in Vedanta or in Hinduism in general, they dealt with the questions of empirical reality as well as the absolute, and with a real focus on, anubhati, personal experience. But in the West, it seems like philosophers almost exclusively dealt with empiricism, and almost never with the absolute, maybe with the exception of Plotinus or a few like that. Can you explain why the huge disparity?
Yeah, first I will tell you something interesting. One of the oldest schools of Indian philosophy was a kind of cutthroat materialism, Charvaka philosophy. So it was yoga. It is they believed only in direct perception. Pratyaksha pramana is called, only direct perception. Whatever the senses and mind perceive, it don't exist. They were materialist, in fact. As a compact philosophical system, it is very ancient. The Charvaka system of Lokayatana. Lokayat means they believe the world alone is real. It's something called Lokayatikas, different Charvaka philosophy. So they went beyond John Locke or J.S. Mill or Bentham in their emphasis on empirical, emphasis on empiricism. So not only then, some of them even went as far as being bohemians. So Lokayatikas. So you have to remember, so Indian materialists also shared the same view. It is wrong to assume that Indian philosophy is obsessed with the transcendental ideas. That is not fully correct. Not fully correct. You have to remember, often, what comes out of India is mostly the Vedantic ideas. That thanks to Swami Vivekananda, because the first great thinker, authentic voice that appeared in America from India was Vivekananda, and he was a missionary. He was a champion of Vedanta. So that, and also the great American and European thinkers got impressed by mostly Vedantic ideas. So most of the great writers, most of the great, all the, you call Schopenhauer, Paul Deussen, or linguists like Kohlbrook, Windenitz, MacDonald, Max Muller, or even coming to America, Emerson, Whitman, Thoreau, they were all highly impressed by the transcendental ideas of Indian philosophical heritage, not the material, because they have enough of it. So this is an important thing to remember. But even now, if you numerically, Advaitis may not be the majority in India. It is wrong to assume. But among general public, they have believed this is something higher. Advaita as a culture is there. The universal toleration, accepting all traditions, looking at all different cultural variations with respect and compassion, understanding, broad-mindedness. That is there. That may be an indirect consequence of Advaita culture. But as a philosophy, you have to remember, India produced so many systems of philosophy. And again, this Indian atomists called Vaisheshikas, or Indian evolutionists called Sankhyas, they were not Advaitis. They were not Advaitis. They were not Advaitis, really speaking. So, and Mimamskas were very profound, very popular for a long time. They were not Advaitis. So, Advaita is perhaps the most respected and most recognized system of Indian philosophy. That is, after all, when you go to see, when an Indian comes to America, he would like to study and read about some of the great thinkers of America, if he's a student of philosophy. He won't be looking for something in the Wild West novels or anything. He'll be reading the great names in American culture and tradition, the writings of Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and great thinkers of this country. That's an important thing. So similarly, when Westerners go to India, when they try to study Indian philosophy, they'll be mostly going for the more profound, the more transcendental, more universal types of Indian thought systems. That's why Advaita is important. It's important. Empiricism was very much there in India, no doubt about it. Bohemian outlook was very much there for a long time. Utilitarianism also was there. After all, the Lokayatikas are all utilitarians and empiricists, no doubt about it. And in Western context, apart from Neoplatonism, Plotinus, and others, you can also see Eckhart, so theologian, because Bertrand Russell in his history of Western philosophy, he seems to produce had some kind of prejudice against theologians. So theologians are inferior to philosophers. That I think that was practically as a result of the backlash against the stranglehold of theology over philosophy, which was the cause of the downfall of free thinking in Europe, right from Augustine's time to maybe the beginnings of Kant's time. See, theology dominated. So theologians had a domination. Independent thinking philosophers were not allowed to flourish so well. So as a backlash, you find modern great historians of Western philosophy, like Bertrand Russell. It's an important name for anyone who studies the history of Western philosophy. You may not recognize the great philosophers who are also great theologians. I don't think there was any greater thinker who are also a theologian than Eckhart, who was a profound philosopher, a thinker. So you can lot of transcendental ideas, Advaitic ideas in the system, and also deep devotional ideas. So you find, you also believe. So there was certainly a strong, higher transcendental thinking in Western world. But frequently, theology had this stranglehold on philosophy, right from Augustine up to maybe the arrival of Kant, the Enlightenment, Reformation, Renaissance, and independent thinking, which actually push back to theology. That's the thing.
So it was theology and the power of the church.
The power of the church. It began with Augustine, of course, the sinfulness idea. So Augustine was a major figure. Augustine himself was well read in Greek thought. Yeah, Hippo, he himself had a very good philosophical background. He was a product of the Alexandrian intellectual traditions. So,
okay, thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I'll call on myself with my hand up, and there are no questions on YouTube that I've seen. Thank you, Maharaj. The panorama of all that healthy discourse, magnificent, really. Here in the West, we see it in everything from seminaries to yeshivas but also in literary circles. The combat is somewhat fierce. Legal philosophers, but certainly these literary critics on the Upper West Side of Manhattan were ferocious with each other in a very healthy, beautiful way.
Yeah.
But the tapestry of the Indian philosophy is unique, of course. And one of the things that struck me from your address tonight was the idea that they coexisted, but in some cases they merged as schools. So you have both heterodoxy and you have the consistency of the lineage at the same time, which is absolutely remarkable. But the question I have goes right to the beginning of your class, when you said that there were schools, I think you associated with the Jaina philosophy, where they said it may be so, that the certitude was not there on certain issues. Now the issues,
It's called Syadvada.
yeah, I was going to ask you. So I was going to ask you about the power of that, the power of not being certain all the time. Is it a weak position to say it may be so, or is it a strong position where it's appropriate?
Yeah, they were very compassionate, very non-violent, and very broad-minded. So they didn't, and also that system did not produce such profound dialectical works. See, in Advaita and with other systems, there were huge dialectical literature emerging from time to time. So again, I think Jaina philosophy goes back to the days of Vardhamana Mahavira, who was a prince, must be a senior contemporary of Buddha around the same time. There are also records that one disciple of Buddha actually went to Vaishali, where he was and met him anyway. So, and culturally, Jaina philosophy got merged with Hinduism. So today, if you go to India, find in the same family both Jains and Hindus. There, it's common. Jainas actually merge with Hinduism, and Jainas are found only in certain states, not all over the country. But
Maharaj,
Advaita, yeah,
Maharaj, the point I'm making and the question I'm raising is that let's say you're at the Oxford Union Debating Society and they have a thesis and there's a debate and there's an argument pro and there's an argument con. The subject is one thing or another, and one side is selected whether they naturally believe that or not, and they will debate that point of view. It's sort of like the adversarial system in law, where you'll take a position and you will zealously argue that point of view. Now, when it comes to the reality of philosophical debate, which is no small matter, is it is it a cop out to say it may be so or it may not be so, or
yeah,
is it more authentic to really go full out and say this
yeah.
is what I believe?
Yeah, but there's one major difference. Jainas believed the Tirthankaras, the great sages, the lineage. So many, in fact, Vardhamana Mahavira was the last. They believed in so many earlier saints and sages whose teachings they believed they inherited. So there is always an attempt to connect with the heritage and that like lineage in this case. In Oxford Union debate, they won't believe in this kind of lineage because anything even remotely resembling lineage, they look at with suspicion because that is something to religion.
Right.
That has something to the church, something to theology. It means somebody catching you by the throat. You should not think this way. You have no right to interpret Bible according to your preferences. So that fear of church and its stranglehold on human thinking, it's always at the background. That's why the pendulum goes to the other extreme. Nothing to do with the church. But in India, it's interesting. Religion could not directly interfere with free thinking in spite of the insistence on lineage. Because Gargi could openly challenge, in fact, Yajnavalkya. And she's admired for that. She's cheered. So you please go to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4th chapter. You can find this Gargi Yajnavalkya Samvada. It's very interesting. On one occasion, Gargi went on asking questions, and Yajnavalkya really got annoyed. And one I can tell you, Gargi, your head will fall off. Now Yajnavalkya tells Gargi because she pestered Yajnavalkya so much. What it means is not that head will fall physically. What it means is you're asking a question on a subject that is beyond the human intellect to grasp. So you're reaching a realm which is beyond the realm of human intellect and human speculation. So this is an area where you can find answer only by your own spiritual evolution, by meditation, contemplation, things. This is symbolically put this language, Gargi, your head will fall off. And that was enough for Gargi to keep quiet for some time. So very interesting. But the main point is, it was allowed by a king, Janaka. It happens in Janaka's court, in Mithila, which is in today's Bihar state of India. This was actually the cradle of a lot of philosophy in Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedas, and so on for a long time. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yogi, I see your hand up, so I think.
Yogi, most welcome. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, Yogi. Yeah.
About the appearance of the world as mithya. Anything, even if a snake or water, line of water or danda or any other things that we see and superimposed on a rope, they exist and we have seen somewhere. What does Advaita tell about that? If the world is unreal, how can we see it or superimpose it on Atma?
Yeah. No, I know that's why I mentioned this earlier. The world is neither real in the absolute sense, but certainly not unreal in the absolute sense. What do you mean by being unreal? What being unreal means, you don't even think of it. You don't even worry about it. You won't even intellectually, seriously bother about it. The example is equal asat, means absolute non-existence. Yogi, excuse me, were you attending this class from beginning?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, the example given is called Shashavishana. I mean, the horns of a hare, a city in the sky, Gandharva Nagara. There are many such examples. So, if the animal is hare, there cannot be horn. If you are seeing a city, it cannot be in the sky. Because the word itself denies its reality. And we never really discuss those things anytime. That's why Shankaracharya says, nobody talks about what is absolutely unreal. And nobody talks about anything that is absolutely real in terms of affirmation or negation. For example, I cannot say I'm not sitting here now. I cannot say I'm sitting here now, when it is so obvious for everyone to see. That's it. Prasaktasya ko nishedha, prasaktasya ka prastavaha. Aprasaktasya ko nishedha, aprasaktasya ka prastavaha. What is obviously unreal, we don't make a statement about it because we cannot, and there is no need to deny it because obviously it is not there. And what is obvious, we don't need to make a statement because certainly cannot deny. Like that, when a person reaches a level of spiritual enlightenment, then the wrong notion that the world is real is dropped. He doesn't drop it, it falls off. Just like when you bring a light to the dark room, what you earlier thought to be a snake, it is perceived to be a piece of rope. It comes automatically. In fact, we are coming to that, the definition, the next definition by Prakash Atmayedi that we'll discuss next session is Jnana Nivartyatvam Mithyatvam. Jnana Nivartyatvam means, Jnana means knowledge. When somebody goes away, when knowledge comes, that person who is going away should be ignorance. Somebody is vanishing, disappearing. When light comes, the disappearing person should be darkness. Like that, when knowledge comes, something just ceases to exist. That is ignorance. So, a state where we realize the nityatum, the illusoriness of this world, that is not an intellectual concept. It is a state that we reach when we evolve in spiritual life. That's why, in fact, remember, the context I shall give in the next session, 5 definitions by 4 post-Shankarite dialecticians. One by Padmapada, that is Sadasatanadhikarnatva Mithyatvam. The second one by Prakashanmayadi in Panchapadika Vivarana, that is Pradipannobhadu Traikadika Nisheta Pradiyogittumva Mithyatvam. And the third one is Jnananivartittumva Mithyatvam. That is also Prakashanmayadi. The fourth one is Swasyanistha Tyanta Bhava Pradiyogittumva Mithyatvam. That is by Chitsukacharya in Tattwapratipika. And the fifth one is by Anandabodha in his book Nyaya Deepavali Sadviviktatva Nityatam. So remember, the point is, all these 5 definitions are taken up by a Dvaita dialectician, the opposite party, Madhvacharyas. Here, and he's one of the greatest thinkers of India, belonging to non-Advaita tradition. His name is Vyasa Tirtha or Vyasa Raja. Actually, he was the guru or one of the greatest kings of India. Vijayanagar Krishnadevaraya was a great name in the history of southern states, southern India. Krishnadevaraya, the greatest king of Vijayanagar Empire. And the Vyasa Tirtha was his guru. He was a great mystic and great sage and saint. So he wrote a very wonderful book, one of the most profound dialectical books called Nyayamrutam. In that book, he criticized these definitions of Mithyatvam, the doctrine of illusoriness given by Advaitins, and he demolished, or at least people thought he had successfully demolished, till Madhusudana Saraswati came a little later. And Madhusudana wrote even a far greater dialectical work. To understand his book is called Advaita Siddhi. One very voluminous. Every word you have to study from a teacher. Every word you have to study from a teacher. So he wrote Advaita Siddhi. In that Advaita Siddhi, he defended the Advaitins' propositions of Mithyatvam, demolishing Vyasatirtha's criticism. Of course, this was again taken up by the Dvaita dialecticians, which are again defended by Advaitins. So that's why I want to say, once in this modern age, if we can hit our heads against these heavy stones, it will be a great joy. I mean, we should be able to enjoy this bliss of encountering great thinkers, dialecticians. Well, it's a great joy. So thank you. We will slowly proceed, and you are most welcome with questions. I know this is not going to be a very pleasant journey, but it absolutely a bliss every inch of the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. And you know, Yogi, I will tell you, in front of me, there is a Swami sitting here, Swami Vedanta. He's 88 years old. Himself was a professor in the University Berkeley. A great, well-known physicist he was. He became a monk. He doesn't miss one class. Yogi, are you listening? Oh,
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj.
He doesn't miss one class. And he says he enjoys every word of this kind of classes. That means there is something great in this, in connecting with our ancient heritage. You know? So thank you so much, Yogi, for these interesting questions. You are most welcome. We shall conclude now today for the day.
Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.